it's scientists compare the auroras, the northern and southern lights, to a television, in which the cathode is an electron beam that hits the atmosphere above the above the Arctic areas, Arctic and Antarctic, and actually they don't know where that cathode comes from. Well, at least the original articles that I got from Encyclopedia Britannica said that, but later years, the scientists were claiming that the cathode, or the electron beam causing the aurora lights, is coming from our outer sun. But they're contradicting themselves, because the Earth has a magnetic field that surrounds it, that protects it from the solar wind from our outer sun, so that it cannot enter. It is bent around the Earth's magnetic field when it comes in proximity. So the radiation that is causing the Van Allen radiation belts and the northern lights is actually coming from the inner sun. The Earth inside of our hollow Earth, there is a sun. There is a small inner sun. It's estimated about 600 miles in diameter. Olaf Jensen and his father were a couple of Norwegian fishermen that in 1929 were north of Franz Josef Land up in the Arctic. And they noticed there was a lead in the ice, and he told his father, "You've told me many times about our ancestors that believed that in the north there are a chosen people that live there. And why don't we go explore?" Because there was this lead in the ice, and his father says, "Are you willing to explore?" And he says, "Okay." And so they went off through this lead in the ice towards the northeast. And they didn't even know the polar opening existed, but they accidentally just sailed right through it. There's just a gradual curvature of the Earth that goes into the hollow Earth through this polar opening. And about halfway through, they could see over the horizon this inner sun. And he described it several times in his book. He says that it is pretty much stationary, although there's research by astronomer Edmund Halley of Britain in the 1700s. He's the one that discovered Halley's Comet. He came up with the theory that the Earth was hollow because of the magnetic field of the Earth. And his study of the magnetic field of the Earth was that the magnetic field rotates about once every 700 years. So apparently the inner sun does rotate very slowly, about once every 700 years. I believe it actually in the beginning of the Earth's creation, it was rotating once every 1,000 years, but there have been changes in the Earth's orbit that has caused it our solar year to change, so that now it's about 700 years. And he says this inner sun is divided between its day and night sides, so that on the day side it's like a bright cloud, white cloud for daytime, and on the dark side it's a brownish red color for night, and it has an large opaque circular area that he says within this circular opaque area are little dots, like holes in it that lets out bright light like stars at night. And since the magnetic field of the Earth causes the magnetic field lines to go out through our south polar opening, out through the South Pole, and then go in the North Pole, their directions of the compasses are exactly opposite of ours. So actually, the sun does appear to come up in the morning in the east, but it is their east. And their North Pole is our South Pole. Our North Pole is their North. Our North Pole is their South Pole. Or our South Pole is their North Pole. So the Van Allen radiation belts are actually radiation. It comes from the inner sun solar wind that comes out through the pole openings. It hits the atmosphere above the poles. These are charged particles that come from the sun. They're like electrons and protons, and they follow the electromagnetic field lines of the Earth, and that's why they appear like an oval over the poles, is because the magnetic field has that shape over the poles, is an oval shape. And then they follow the electromagnetic field lines towards the equator, and they congregate over the equator in what they call the Van Allen radiation belts.
Right, because I always thought of the Van Allen radiation belts as being outside of the Earth.
The magnetic field of the Earth it continues out in this space quite a distance, but there's like layers of it. If you have a compass, the compass will point to our North Pole because the compass needle that's pointing towards our North Pole is the South Pole of that compass. And so in magnetics, opposites attract, and that's why it points towards our North Pole, and it actually follows the magnetic field lines of the Earth. Well, these magnetic field lines continue way out into space, and the charged particles that come up out of the polar opening, they follow these magnetic field lines, and they congregate over the equator, and in what they call the Van Allen radiation belts.
There are many pilots who are aware of the polar openings that fly in the Arctic, correct?
Actually, we do. On my website, ourhollowearth.com, I was able to get one of my friends his name is Ivars. He now lives in England. At that time, he was living in the United States, and every time he would go from one place to another after he had learned about the Hollow Earth and bought my book, he would ask, he would sit on an airplane, and he would always try to sit next to a pilot that was going as a passenger, so he could ask them to see if any of them had ever seen the polar opening. And he actually found one that had seen it. And he sat down next to him, and they struck up a conversation. You can watch the video on my website.
I did.
Interview.
Very interesting. What does he do now?
He works for his father in their family business, and they have some electronic equipment that they build, and he used to live here in the Phoenix area, but he moved to England now.
In that video, he discloses what he was told by a pilot who has flown around the North Pole openings, not in, but around.
Well, yes, the pilot explained that you cannot fly over this polar opening. It does exist. It's a big hole in the Arctic Ocean, and the reason why you can't fly over it is because there's no gravity in the hole. In fact, the very first satellites that were sent up over the Arctic in polar orbit were lost because they didn't take into account the polar opening. And then it wasn't until later that they were able to achieve polar orbits by flying them either side of the polar opening. And I have several images showing the flight path of satellites, and they all show that they do not fly over a certain area up there in the Arctic or the Antarctic, because there's a hole at the pole and near the pole and near the South Pole. It goes into the inner Earth. These openings are quite large. My estimate is that starts curving in the Earth about 700 miles north of Point Barrow in the direction of 87.7 north latitude and 142.2 east longitude. And then it just gradually curves into the hollow Earth at the point where the neck of the opening, where the land masses are closest together. I estimate is about